As a beginner runner, how fast should you run? It is a good question and a common mistake runners make. So let me guide you on exactly how to approach your running intensity so you can make quick gains in fitness while lowering your risk of injury. And at the end, I'll also be sharing 2 common confusions new runners make that get them into big trouble. When you're first starting out, it's hard to determine what speed you should run. Some are impatient and try to run faster and further every running attempt, while some compare their pace to other, more experienced runners. Both of these approaches are not sensible and can potentially put you in injury territory. Listen closely. In your first few weeks of running, I want you to exercise with only one metric in mind, and that is your RPE, or rate of perceived exertion. This is your internal interpretation of how much effort you are putting in. So remove heart rate zones, remove pace or speed metrics, and don't compare yourself to others. With that said, let's learn more about the RPE scale and how you can utilize it for success. Here is the RPE rating scale out of 10, along with some descriptions to see if you are exercising in the correct zone. 10 represents max out effort, while 1 indicates something similar to a light walk. Let's hone in on a 2 to 3 out of 10 for a moment. This is an intensity where you feel like you can maintain it for hours. You can sing, whistle, and chat without feeling out of breath. Taking the intensity up 1 notch, a 4 out of 10 will depict a moderate exercise intensity with a stable, steady state of effort. Achieving a steady state means the build-up and removal of fatiguing factors are well balanced. Therefore, your legs should feel comfortable, your breath rate is under control, and you should feel like you can hold this pace beyond 40 minutes. Now, here is the kicker. If you are a beginner runner and haven't exercised for a while, you should commit 100% of your exercise to an RPE of 4 or below. Personally, I'd like to see the bulk of your exercise at a 2 or 3. Therefore, if you're jogging as slow as possible and your RPE is still picking up above 4, this is when you begin to do some walking bouts. This approach will keep your intensity within that acceptable range. After hearing me say this, you're probably thinking, but Brody, if all of this is low intensity, how do you expect me to improve? To better explain this, let's go through 2 scenarios. Scenario number 1 is the most common approach. A new runner tries to run fast with an RPE around 6 to 8. They are out of breath and exhausted after 20 minutes. Their enjoyment factor is very low, especially if this RPE persists week over week. This approach also increases the risk of overload and overuse injuries. And lastly, develops some muscle soreness the next day, requiring 1 to 2 days of rest and recovery. The Run Smarter approach has you running at an easy effort at an RPE at a 4 or below. With this intensity under control, you can run further, your enjoyment levels are higher, you reduce your risk of injury, and able to run more frequently in the week because muscle soreness is not present. Your next question is, but Brody, I see really good runners running fast all the time. Correct. Once you build up enough of a foundation of low intensity running, you should gradually incorporate faster running sessions if you want to be a well-rounded athlete. But it might be several months before this happens. And even if you are ready, 80% of your overall training should still be at an RPE of 4 or below. Let me say that again. Even when you're ready to do faster running sessions, 80% of your weekly mileage should still be at an RPE of 4 or below. Now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about 2 common confusions I see when people use RPE. Tip number 1 is that RPE is a feeling, not a pace. Once again, it is an internal interpretation of your effort levels. I say this because a lot of runners ask, how fast is a 4 out of 10 RPE? The truth is, everyone's 4 RPE is different. In fact, your 4 RPE will be different day by day depending on the terrain, the temperature, your recovery, and several other factors. You can use pace as a rangefinder though. For example, I dedicate my slow long runs to a 3 RPE. This means I'll usually start out at a 5-minute 40-second per kilometre pace. That's the equivalent of 9 minutes and 7 seconds per mile. But depending on how I feel throughout the run, my pace will change if my effort levels fluctuate. If I start getting more tired, I slow down, or if I feel super fresh, I'll actually speed up. With practice, you can learn to do the same. Tip number 2 is that RPE is the average of the session, not the final pace. I say this because some runners allocate their RPE based on how they feel at the very end of a run, which is usually misleading. For example, if you want to average a 4 RPE for the session and you know that the final 10 minutes will push the effort levels to a 5 out of 10, then start your run at a 3 out of 10. Evenly balancing out each section of the workout will mean that the average comes to around about 4 out of 10. Practice the skill of running slow right now while you are starting your running journey. You wouldn't believe how often I hear it. Comments like, "It took me 6 months to figure out how to run slow," or "It took me 3 injuries before I realized the power of running slow." So move forward with this powerful insight, leave a comment if you have any questions, and good luck with your running this week.